And call on Matthew McKenna to open the case for the opposition.
Right, I'd like to actually start by picking up some of the horrible things that Ushing actually opened up with. Ushing mentioned a number of things in terms of legitimacy, only one of which I believe is actually relevant. He talked about numbers, who cares about numbers? He talked about barriers of beliefs, who cares about that? But the one thing he mentioned was harm to members. And the only way you can talk about harm to members is if you're not talking about beliefs, you're talking about religion in terms of groups, organisations, or institutions. Institutions only derive legitimacy by doing charitable works, by doing good in the community, by having a public benefit, and by not harming members. That is the only sense with which legitimacy can make any sense in terms of religion. Now, I'm going to establish the Scientology organisation. I'm going to talk about its history. I'm going to talk about how it was founded as a scam, how it has continued to operate as a scam, and I conclude that it's still going on today. Because you have to talk about the organisation, you can't talk about beliefs. For example, up the road there's the Hare Krishnas, and I consider them to be having equally strange beliefs as Scientology. But the point is, I've never heard of the Hare Krishnas asking someone to disconnect from their mother because they couldn't afford a €3,000 course, which is something that has happened with Scientology in our country. Yes?
Do you think that it's harmful in Christianity to ask males to give up sex, to become a priest, so they can be closer to God, and never understand that faculty of being human?
When you ask that question, you on some level recognise the illegitimacy of an organisation that imposes that upon its members. All I ask is that you apply that same logic consistently to the Scientology organisation. If you have an organisation that does that you regard as illegitimate, then also apply the illegitimacy criterion to the Scientology organisation. I think John will actually talk about the Sea organisation, about how extreme they can take the whole, what they call the second dynamic principles in terms of chastity, and if you actually have a baby in the Sea, you can be potentially coerced into having an abortion, etc., etc. So apply that logic consistently, please. Right, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to quote you from a 1953 letter which was written by Hubbard. It was written to one of his secretaries called Helen, and I think it illustrates the mentality that Hubbard started out his creation, his organisation. It reads, "We don't want a clinic. We want one in operation but not in name. Perhaps we could call it a spiritual guidance centre. Think up its name, will you? And we could put in nice desks in our bodies in neat blue with diplomas on the walls, and knock psychiatry into history, and make enough money to shine up the operating scope and keep the HAS solid." HAS means the Hubbard Association of Scientologists. "It is a practical problem in business. I await your reaction on the religion angle." 9 months later, in December of that same year, was the first church of Scientology was opened. Because when you actually realise when Hubbard started, he advertised Dianetics purely as a science. He claimed to be able to cure asthma, arthritis, and allergies. But when you claim to be a science and claim to be able to cure these things, you fall foul of medical licensing laws. And the Hubbard Dianetics Foundation in Elizabeth, New Jersey, was bankrupted after being sued by the New Jersey Board of Medical Examiners. The reason Hubbard started the Church of Scientology was less to do with religious guidance, but the fact he could avoid medical scrutiny for the claims that he was making that he could simply not substantiate. Now, I wouldn't mind if something makes claims, fair enough, but the criterion that Ushing actually hinted to and never followed up with in any way, shape or form is harm to its members. And you're sort of telling someone that, oh, you can't take psychiatric medication and that causes you extreme harm because of that. You have to start calling into question the legitimacy of that organisation. Yes?
That point is irrelevant because what you also have to take into consideration is also people's freedom of will. That they have to make these choices themselves, they have to be informed by these choices, and therefore that point is irrelevant because you have to consider that people have made these choices, that they could have walked away from it.
Informed choice is the key word. The point is, if you take an organisation that is telling lies, making up crap about psychiatrists, according to Scientology, they've made the claim that 9/11 was perpetrated by psychiatrists because Osama bin Laden's right-hand man was actually a paediatrician or something like that, but they mistook for being a psychiatrist. They've made those extreme claims. So if an organisation is fabricating claims to scare people off potentially life-saving medications, I think that has to be considered. Yes?
So you not say the exact same thing about Christianity, which is a legitimate religion?
Could you rephrase that with a specific reference to a group or institution? church is a Christian institution that doesn't do that type of medical. If the group is giving bad medical advice, you accept that you should call into question its legitimacy. The point is not about beliefs, it's about organisations and what the organisations are doing to members. You have plenty of Christian groups in this world that do not give such dangerous advice to people, and you have to recognise that distinction. I mean, I'm actually going to make the point here. Mike Rinder is part of the independent Scientologist movement. Now, at the present, I'm not aware of them performing anywhere near the abuses that Scientology is. I'm not aware of any abuses on anywhere near the scale of Scientology, the Scientology organisation. So for that reason, I would reserve judgment on the independent Scientologists until that becomes clear. I mean, I'm going to actually read another policy letter. It's from October 1962. It's titled Religion, and it gives you more into why the religiosity angle was actually adopted. It was entirely about making money. I just love this quote. Scientology 1970 has been planned on a religious basis throughout the world. This will not upset in any way the activities of any organisation. It is entirely a matter for accountants and solicitors. I have evidently failed in designating HASI Limited as a non-profit organisation and cannot transfer HASI assets to any but a non-profit corporation. When he started out, he was claiming, oh, we're science. The religion aspect was there purely to shield criticism that his organisation simply couldn't withstand.
Sir,
Yes?
do you think it's possible that the Galactic Confederation were using Elron numbers as an imperfect vessel to spread our salvation? Do you think he's their prophet? Do you think that's possible?
No, Hubbard couldn't be a prophet because that completely is at odds with what the actual Scientology mythology actually preaches. But in terms of what you call it, you're asking the question of what's the actual truth value of the beliefs. The point is, I only can look at this in terms of harm to members of the organisation. I mean, I'm going to consider the Raelians as being someone with some pretty far out beliefs, but I'm not aware of them committing abuses on the scale that the Scientology organisation has. I'm actually going to, what do you call it? Talk about a few instances that have actually happened to Ireland. If you're familiar with, fair game, in fact, Mike Rinder was actually hassled at Dublin Airport. He's been followed by private investigators. We're all familiar with these, right? I'm going to talk about a little bit of what the organisation does to members in Ireland in our own backyard, just to give a little bit of an example, right? I'll be protesting again outside the organisation headquarters on Saturday, and I'll probably be joined by Anne Robinson, who hasn't seen her brother Tony Phelan since 2002. I mean, this is an example of disconnection that they practice. I also talked about Gabrielle Wynne, who was told to disconnect from her mother because her mother might be a suppressive influence, and the reason she couldn't afford a €3,000 course when they were having a fundraising cycle to try and buy a new building. I'm actually going to have another little document here, which is courtesy of John B. Thank you, John. John filed a data protection. He was actually in Scientology, and it's just some of the prices of the courses that he was coerced into paying. 2 intensive knife repair, €2,000. 1 intensive knife repair, €1,000. Purification rundown, TRs and objectives, €1,720. And it's all about the money. And that's what it comes down to. The reason that these disconnection policies is to isolate people from criticism so that we can continue bilking money out of people. Sorry.
What's the difference between this disconnection and a closed monastery thing?
And a closed monastery thing. Informed consent. That's the big one. When you actually join a monastery, you're told from day one what you're actually going to be led into. When you're actually joining the Scientology, you're told, oh, we strengthen family relationships. And then if your family start becoming concerned about your involvement, then you get handed to disconnect from them. So the difference in dynamics between the closed monastery, where you're informed from day one, and the duplicitous, manipulative experience you will have in Scientology, I don't think you can really compare them. I do appreciate the question. Appreciate the platform for making that point. In Scientology, there's actually a pact called the hard sell pact. They actually teach people that hard selling to salvage somebody is a good thing. They teach people how to reg people, how to get them to sign up for courses, how to pay more money. In fact, I'm not aware of any other organisation that has actually codified policies on how to find people's weak spots, on how to actually penetrate them, find out what their psychological buttons are so that we can manipulate them. They even have an actual group called Common Ruins, which is set out to use, for example, depression, job insecurity. These are things that are codified. I don't know of any other organisation that has such codified policies to really get into people's fears. Because if you're human, you have wants, hopes, dreams, desires, aspirations. Everyone has them. You're human. And Scientology plays in those. It has policies to do so. And if anyone wants to suggest other organisations they think does it as policy-driven as Scientology organisation does, I'd like to hear about it, because if you can't, and if other religious organisations aren't doing this, then I think the claim that Scientology is as legitimate as any other religious organisation is a nonsense. A complete and utter nonsense.